How to learn a language after 40. Hi, my name's Chris from OuiCommunicate. I'm a real business. I do real classes, real French classes online, and the theme of this video is how to learn a language after 40. And if you're 40 and watching this, I want you to know I'm under absolutely no pressure to try to look upbeat, cool, young. I've made peace with my age. I feel perfectly fine. I find that this has taken a lot of pressure off my YouTube videos since I decided not to care anymore. So I do care about teaching French. I do care about doing it well. But as far as looking upbeat and YouTubey and all that, I've decided I'm going to speak to real people who, with real questions, and we're not going to go by the usual YouTube format. This is very, very relaxing for me. Anyway, let's talk about age. If you're listening to me now or reading the article that's up on my website, age probably matters to you and causes you to wonder if you're still capable. Is your mind past it, and can you still learn a language, or in this case, can you still learn French? It's hard to deny that we don't live in an ageist world. Everything needs to be associated with young, like from trends to ways of thinking to inventions. Even the internet that we're using now has the connotation of being young. We're somehow pressured into thinking that everything young is at the forefront of modernity. And we forget that we're basing many of our values on a human state of development that lasts for a very short while and stands at the very opposite of maturity. Young versus maturity. Now, it's quite funny in a sense, because we're knowingly following a trend that we know cannot be wise or mature. Many people feel worried to find themselves in a state that's opposite of young. They figure that by default they're now old, or if you're not young you're probably old. And at this stage the self-doubt slips in and they wonder what's left in the old tank. The truth of the matter, as I see it, is that the benefits of young only serve for a very few limited advantages. They can perform better at competitive sports. They can handle hangovers better. And they can get through a day by only sleeping 4 hours. And I should have added another one. When they take a fall, it doesn't hurt as much. Okay, 4. That's the list I came up with. To believe that there are any other physical or mental advantages is incorrect. Or at least they'd be theoretical on paper and underused by young people anyway. In a word, the young people are not outperforming you. I think it's important to keep that in mind. So what are the advantages of age? When you face a new language, young and old are not so distant as you might think. When we approach the task of learning a language, both are essentially facing the same difficulty. Both groups think back on their school years and try to remember how learning worked. Older learners have a naturally foggier idea of their days in school or college. They remember that they sat in class while the teachers told them stuff and occasionally did homework. They perceive studies as a period in their life that's contrary to the stage of aging, and this causes worry. I'm old now, I'm going back in time, it's something I used to do when I was a lot younger. It seems contradictory and it does cause worry. Now, young people have no better idea how school works, despite being involved with it, because their lack of maturity prevents them from seeing the larger picture and to properly understand the rules of the game, so to speak. They go to school, day in, day out, while on full automatic mode. So it's incorrect to think that because young learners are closer to school, that they have any better idea of how it works. Even teenagers that I've seen in my private lessons believe that sitting in a French class is enough to learn the language. Most that I've met have no method or comprehension of what's expected of them. They often think the miracle will happen by attending, and they really, really, really do believe that. Like sitting in class equals the learning. I know why they think that, because it does work in high school. Unless you perform really, really, really badly, you're usually going to go up a grade. The issue that I'm pointing at, and by the way, I'll say something else about young learners, because it may come across as shocking. When you're involved in school and it becomes your daily life, you lack first of all, the maturity, but also I think the inquisitive mind of questioning what you're doing. That there are hundreds of variables regarding school. High school. Like, what's the purpose? What's the plan? What am I doing? And it's not about criticizing high school. It's about thinking, reflecting, taking a step back and thinking about the purpose of school. Like the school bus here comes every morning. I bet if I stopped the student and asked him, what are you going to do today in school, he would not know. So he's not in control of the plan. He doesn't know. He's rather more, I don't want to use the word trains, but it's effectively what they do. They react. They react to whatever's going to happen. The pace is not set by the students, so they are in a more, it's not proactive. They're being taken along. The pace is being set by someone else. And I have in the same way, you've probably never heard a pupil sit in class and say, teacher, sorry, I've skipped 2 chapters ahead. I had a question about page 54. Could we zoom in on this, please? No. That's not the way it works. It's a linear progression. The pace is set by the teacher. So they are in a spectator's role, and they don't truly understand the plan. I've spoken to high school pupils who take Spanish in class in America. They don't even understand the end points. That's quite amazing, because you take the simple question, where do you expect to get 4 years from now by taking Spanish in school? They don't know. They've never even thought of it. They just go to Spanish class. That's what they do. They go to chemistry class. They're not thinking beyond. They're not thinking of what purpose could it serve. Okay, that's why I say that young people who are actively involved in school don't understand the larger purpose, don't understand really the game they're playing. They perform day to day, but don't truly know why they are there, so it doesn't really give them an advantage. The issue that I'm pointing at with all these remarks is that young and old are both influenced by their experience in school or college. So the status of school as the gold standard of learning wrongly shapes the idea of how a language is best learned, and that's a very, very big problem. Because of the time gone by, older adults have a better chance at separating the school experience with the present task of learning a language. So it will be easier for them to separate the two. Young people, being still involved in a, so to speak, assisted way of living, will find it much harder to develop the necessary self-discipline and step out of the school-like behavior. What this means is, I've seen many young people show up to my classes and they adopted a school-like behavior. Now, what do you do in school? I spoke about it a minute ago. Well, you don't know what you're doing, really. You're not in charge of the pace or of the plan. You don't really know. You don't really know what you'll be doing 3 months from now. So what you do essentially in school, except for homework and the occasional studying, is that you show up. And that's what many young people did in my classes. They just showed up. And the the demeanour, if you will, was, well, hello, here I am, teach me. They're not trained to be proactive. You show up for your 2 o'clock class, and hello, teach me. It could even be the same thing as last week, or the week before, or even 3 months before. That's quite fascinating, because students aren't trained to track their own performance. They won't even realize that they're treading water. They're not progressing in French. They're just one week to the next. They still don't know the past tense. Because they don't feel any pressure either. And it's also, incidentally, the parents that are paying for the lessons. But they will happily talk about the past tense in French for 5 months if it comes to that. They're not trained to track their own progress. Okay, so it will be easier for older people. Okay, now let's next talk about the advantage of maturity. And this text you can find on my website. I'll put the link up on the video now if you want to read it. As I mentioned above, because of the ever-present idea of young in all facets of life, we find ourselves in a constant scramble for modern inventions. Now, coffee probably tasted just as good 300 years ago, but now the machine needs to have a timer on it and a USB charger. The fact that all the smart things we ever need to hear or be taught have been said centuries ago by the Greek philosophers carries no weight in today's society. So we still think that somehow young will outdo the wisdom of the ages. It's just a trait of our society. Now, an Elon Musk, with his angular car, is seen as brainy and inventive. We don't quite know why we think this. We just do. We think he's brainy. A mature learner has the advantage of being able to put events into perspective. They're less prone to falling victim to fads. So the expression, there ain't nothing new under the sun, can only be truly said after a number of years walking under said sun. So soon enough we see that the true breakthroughs are far and few between. So a young person will fall, I think, victim to trends and fads more easily than an older person who has more time to compare events. And after a while you do indeed realize that there's nothing new under the sun. Everything that had to be said has been said, and it's just essentially new things in a different form. In the field of education and language teaching, I unapologetically declare that every single nonsensical invention was made by and targeted towards young people. Specialists are up in arms and now decry the lack of basic reading abilities among college graduates, or because of modern reforms in the way kids learned to read. Instead of encouraging students to make lateral connections and find depth in meaning, this is very important to me. So instead of encouraging students to make lateral connections between things and find depth in meaning, modern testing invented multiple choice questions, which I now know was invented in the 1930s in America, that did anything but develop thinking. I'm struggling with an English test. I have to do a praxis test, the 5039, the praxis test, because in order to get into high schools in America I have to do an English test. I find it really hard. They pull out 10 questions about 10 lines on Shakespeare, 10 lines of Shakespeare. They manage to pull out 10 questions. They zoom in on one word and you're meant to choose your answers. That's not literature. That's not learning. That's BS. There's no knowledge in that. There's no mental skill. You don't know anything more about literature from doing a multiple choice question. Shakespeare can't fit into a multiple choice test. It doesn't work that way. They are promoting stupidity. Fact, sorry. I said I didn't care anymore. I do care about French though, sorry. I do that very seriously. Now today, I'm going back to the text, there are all manner of phone apps and learning platforms that promise fun and effortless learning. But if we're not careful, common sense finds itself competing with the latest trends and battling for the customer's attention in the internet marketplace, which is something I've decided not to do anymore. I won't be battling against the latest trend or fad or upbeat way of speaking on YouTube. I think common sense has its place in society. Wisdom, common sense versus anything modern. And there's nothing wrong with modern, but it shouldn't be the guiding force and the principle by which we live or die, so to speak. And yet, one of the two learning methods, common sense versus anything modern, has proven benefits. The good old paper to hand to brain method, writing things down. Now this is a very verifiable fact that the marvels of architecture, if you've ever been to Europe, to Italy and so forth, the marvels of architecture, philosophy, mathematics, literature and art were all done to the highest possible level before modern ever came to us. Now certainly, this being said, technology is a valuable aid in the fields of health or mechanics even, but has it ever done anything for the quality of our learning and our thinking? Has it? Has modern ever done that for us? Technology, has it done anything for our learning and our thinking? Now, indirectly perhaps, but not as a main purpose. I think the very first thing before learning a language, young or old, is to do a self-check on your beliefs regarding education and languages. Before starting learning a language, you could take a pen and paper out and write down your beliefs about language learning, and this is very important. Perhaps you believe it's complicated, or that it takes years to achieve. You might believe it's quite simple, and that a little small phrase book suffices. Whatever your answers, you must be aware that this will shape your experience and your approach to learning a language. We can only ever accomplish things that are in line with our beliefs, which makes this phase particularly important. We can only achieve things that are in line with our beliefs. I almost call it pre-study, pre-purchase, even before you've signed up for that language class. What do you believe about learning? What do you believe about languages? How is this going to influence what's going to come next? Most people have a mental model of learning that's based on, once again, high school, because it is the gold standard. They picture chairs, desks, a teacher, a blackboard. And they'll seek to recognize this in language schools that they choose. Is it similar to high school? Yes or no? We all know that our time in high school didn't lead to much knowledge, but we still somehow consider it the type of setup, I'm talking about the classes, blackboard and all that, to look for in a language school for adults, and that's quite fascinating. Like if you don't see that setup that you recognize from high school, you probably think there's something dodgy about it, or at least it just doesn't look familiar enough. And a lot of language schools follow this model. I'm not sure they know why they're doing it, but they are. Once you've gathered all those beliefs on a piece of paper, try to ascertain how many of these are grounded in reality. Or at the very least ask yourself where they come from. Ask yourself the same thing about your age and where your beliefs about old versus young come from. Hopefully the first part of the exercise has made it clear to you how you're approaching the mission of learning a language. What frame of mind are you in? I think it's very important. It has a larger bearing on the results than we usually think. People approach the learning process, they approach language, they approach age with all these preconceived beliefs about their performance, about many, many, many things. It's much more complex. There are many, many beliefs that we're, in a sense, we're fighting against and that shape our result as language learners. This is why it's so important to think about yourself as a language learner. What are you carrying with you in terms of mental weight, in terms of restraints and limitations before you even start? Next we should, what frame of mind are you in before you start? What frame of mind are you in before you even start learning a language? Now the next thing I think we should ask ourselves, what is a language? And this is very important also, and even if you don't have a definite answer, it's important to think about it. Is it a loose collection of words with different sounds attached to them? Is it a system of communication? Can it be broken down into little parts? Does it have a beginning and an end? Write down all you believe French to be. That's my advice. Think of the language you already know and try to describe it. At this stage, if you've done it, you should now have quite a collection of thoughts in front of you. Your beliefs about learning, about age, and those about language, which will shape your experience as a language learner. A lot of the mental blocks you might be facing can be found in those lines you wrote. The big advantage in being older is you're not involved with school anymore, and you'll be able to distance yourself more easily from the social conditioning, for lack of a better word. I think for a young person who's currently in school and living in a world of internet and apps and chats and things, and also a belief in the powers of modern and digital and all that, I think a young person, it will be a lot harder to point them towards common sense, what works in terms of learning, and what's always worked. Writing down, hand to arm to brain, write down your thoughts, structure a piece of paper. It's so important. For older learners, it will also be easier to accept the notion that anything valuable contains a degree of hardship, whether it's a relationship with someone, having a family, holding on to a job. Anything valuable is always hard, and I've noticed a lot of young people look for shortcuts, obviously. Your mature critical thinking will give you an advantage over young people who'll be looking for the latest hack and minimal effort. And I really don't like that word, hack, the latest hack, because anyone who comes up with an app, well, there's always a hack involved, and minimal effort and get there quickly. And I'd almost say that the older you are, the more advantaged you are when learning French. These ideas of young versus old are largely developed by business logic that has extended to the rest of society, and that's my grief with young versus old. It is a business logic. It's not a true thing in society or in biology even. So improvement for the sake of improvement leads the charge, and with it, the thirst for any product or concept deemed young. So to all you 40+ learners who want to learn a language, please don't let it fool you. These marketing tactics don't apply for things that truly matter. And human beings were built to perform past the age of 26, believe it or not. So let's not confuse the peak performance of a professional athlete with the needs of an ordinary person. Yes, you can learn a language at a later age, and I have videos to prove that it does and it has worked. And I'm waiting for you to start. My name's Chris, I'm a real teacher, I have a real French business. You can really find me in the real world, and I'm very confident I can make you a learner, a student, a user, a proficient user of French past the age of 40. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Chris from OuiCommunicate. Bye.